On December 11th, 1977, ABC debuted a TV Christmas movie called It Happened One Christmas.
Mary Bailey lived an extraordinary life, a life not unlike yours, one filled with joy, sorrow,
I love you.
and triumph.
Sometimes I think it'd been better if I'd never been born at all.
Then she met her guardian angel, who taught her the greatest secret of all.
Something terrible's happening.
You've never been born.
Oh, George, you know me.
Marlo Thomas,
I'm your wife.
Cloris Leachman, Orson Welles, and Wayne Rogers. It Happened One Christmas.
Watch tomorrow here on ABC.
If that movie looks familiar, you're correct. It Happened One Christmas is a remake made for TV adaptation of the classic 1946 film It's a Wonderful Life. Produced by Marlo Thomas's Daisy Productions, the remake was released before It's a Wonderful Life was in the public domain and wasn't really shown on TV that often. Because of that, some people may never have seen the original and thought It Happened One Christmas was an original story. 31 years after Frank Capra's classic, the remake had a lot of similarities to the original, but also some differences. So, did It's a Wonderful Life need a remake? Was it any good? Well, I'm not going to say it's awful, but let's take a deep dive and compare It Happened One Christmas to It's a Wonderful Life and see how necessary or different this remake really was. The biggest difference besides not being in black and white is the gender swapping of roles. Marlo Thomas plays Mary Bailey, who, like Jimmy Stewart's George Bailey, wants to travel the world and leave the crummy town of Bedford Falls behind. While George wanted to build highways and skyscrapers, Mary wants to be a creative writer. Both of them feel like they are trapped, unable to leave because of their loyalty to the people of Bailey Building and Loan. In the remake, Mary Bailey will marry George Hatch, swapping not only genders, but last names as well. Both movies begin with Joseph calling for an angel to answer the residents of Bedford Falls' prayers for help with George and Mary. Henry Travers, who played George's guardian angel Clarence, is now Clara, played by Cloris Leachman. Both angels are a little dim and eccentric and are tasked to stop George and Mary from committing suicide as they learn more about their life. The earliest memory still finds Mary and George rescuing Harry from drowning in the icy water after sledding on snow shovels. However, Mary comes away unscathed, unlike George, who loses his hearing in his left ear because of the incident. We meet George Hatch, who has caught the eye of Mary. He works at Gower's drugstore, just like George Bailey does in the original, but it's Mary who notices Mr. Gower accidentally putting poison in the medicine. When confronted, Mr. Gower doesn't smack her around like he does George, and admits she saved the life of that child. Mary Bailey already works at the building alone, running errands after school, and so we eventually get the same scene hearing Potter berate their father.
Yours.
My pop's not a failure.
No, not now, Mary.
You're better than him. All he's got is money. My pop's not afraid of you. Everybody knows it.
Typical Bailey. All sentiment.
He's not a failure. You can't say that about my father. You're not. You're the biggest man in town.
Run along.
Bigger than him.
Run along.
Bigger than everybody.
Bailey, you get an idea of the Baileys.
Don't let him say that about you, Pop.
We then move forward in time when Mary and George are both 18 or about to leave Bedford Falls to explore the world. Mr. Gower gives them each a giant suitcase, but only George wishes for $1 million.
Wonderful of you to think of it.
Hope you enjoyed it.
I wish I had $1 million. Hot dog!
That evening, the family has dinner where they both talk to Pa Bailey about being stuck in a dead-end job. The sassy yet stereotypical Bailey maid Annie, who gave up her divorce money if she ever got married, is wisely removed in this version. Mary and George both agree to go to Harry's high school dance, but no gin.
No gin tonight, son.
Oh, Pop, just a little?
No, son, not one drop.
The dance scenes were both shot at the Beverly Hills High School swim gym. Built in 1939, the pool is under the gymnasium floor, revealed with a push of a button, and is still in use today. It's here where the couples fall into the pool during the Charleston contest. Both couples walk home and connect as George is in a football uniform and Mary is in a robe. Buffalo Gal's Won't You Come Out Tonight is not sung, and Mary never loses her robe.
By the light of dawn.
George and Mary both throw a rock at the Granville house, with Mary giving us a backstory that the house was owned by a Spanish ambassador whose wife had an affair with Potter.
Oh, George, that's the biggest scandal ever to hit Bedford Falls. Mr. Potter and the ambassador's wife.
Old man Potter?
Yeah, they had one torrid, impetuous summer, and then it was over. The ambassador found out about it, packed up, left, never came back.
It's an interesting backstory that we don't get to the original, but it turns out she made it up for us to understand that she is a creative writer. The movie never really explores her creative writing aspirations, and maybe that was intentional to show she just gave up on her dreams. They both break windows and make a wish. In both versions, Harry tells them that father had a stroke. Following his death, Mary visits her father's grave. Three months later, we get a similar scene with the board as they discuss how to move forward now that Peter Paley has passed. The Scrooge of Bedford Falls, portrayed by Lionel Barrymore in the original, is now played by Orson Welles in the remake, and he's just as evil. Welles plays Potter with an element of respect for Mary that we really don't get with Lionel Barrymore's Potter. Of course, with Mary, he's a little bit more sexist towards her, which is probably what they wanted to go for, especially for the times. Potter continues to want to abolish the building and loan, and Mary and George both give a speech about letting Potter take over everything to the board.
You know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000? Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be.
I'm not interested in your book. I'm talking about the building and loan.
I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know. Well, I've said too much. You're the board here. You do what you want with this thing. There's just one thing more, though. This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter. Come on.
Now, well, wait just a minute here.
Now, look here, Mary. Your father was no businessman, and business is what we're here to discuss. No matter how sad I am at his passing.
Oh, that's wonderful coming from you, Potter. Considering you probably sent him to his grave.
Ridiculous.
You're what's ridiculous, Mr. Potter. You never could beat my father, could you?
You're a preposterous girl, Mary. You'd better hurry off to Europe and write one of those books. You deal better in fiction than real life. You think I couldn't have crushed this nickel and dime operation in a day if I'd wanted to?
Well, maybe this is a nickel and dime operation. And frankly, why anybody would want to spend their life doing it is beyond me. But Peter Bailey dedicated his life to it, and you people should understand what you're giving up before you knuckle under to it.
Now, Mary, let's not get all excited.
You should get excited. I'm leaving. You're the ones that have to stay here. You should understand that a man like Ernie Baker being able to buy his own taxi cab and own his own house.
A taxi driver.
Yeah, taxi driver. My father knew what gave people self-respect. When Potter here gouges them for his company shacks, he steals from them a lot more than just their money. He steals their dignity. And you may not think that shows up on some financial sheet for a hardware store or matters to a doctor or a judge. But just watch what happens to all of you if you let him win.
Barney Martin, probably best known as Jerry Seinfeld's father, plays Uncle Willie in the remake. And for some reason, they changed Peter Bailey's brother from the original name of Billy to Willie. Willie doesn't have the pet squirrel or put strings onto his fingers to remember things, but the one thing he does acknowledge is that he's a bit forgetful and unreliable. In the remake, Potter makes a suggestion with his support that Mary takes over the Bailey building and loan. We also see that even Uncle Willie knows he's not capable of taking over. What is interesting in the remake is that Potter has respect for Mary, but he will enjoy watching her fail.
Typical Bailey. Long on speeches, short on action. No, sir, young lady. The deal doesn't include anybody else but you. I want you to run it into bankruptcy.
Harry returns from school on a train. In the original, George and Uncle Billy greet him, but in the remake, the entire family picks him up, and we see George Hatch also gets off the train. Everything else is about the same as Harry disappoints them by not taking over the building alone. Harry's secret new wife, Ruth Dakin.
Ruth Dakin Bailey, if you don't mind.
That's right. Well, I wired you I had a surprise. Here she is. Meet the wife.
And he's been offered a job. The remake shows us the party, where Mary Bailey sees George again. And we don't get the drunk Uncle Billy, but we do see Mary and George go for a walk, break windows at the house, and then eventually end up at her place. In the original, George just can't get the courage to tell Mary how he feels about her. Unlike the remake, George proclaims his love to her, and she slaps him. George eventually tells her how he feels in a very aggressive way, but in the remake, Mary just tells George not to go.
Please stay.
They get married in both versions on an extremely rainy day. They get into Ernie's cab and show the stack of cash that they have for the honeymoon.
No more waiting.
Goodbye to Bedford Falls.
Goodbye, savings and loans. Goodbye, Potter.
Ernie notices the group of people believing it is a run on the bank.
Never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run.
I'm no expert, but this looks like a run in the bank.
Mary and George open up the locked businesses alone and take a call from Potter. In the original, Mr. Potter will pay 50 cents on the dollar, but in the remake, he's even stingier and will only pay 30 cents on the dollar.
Tell them to bring their shares over here, and I will pay 50 cents on the dollar.
Just tell them to bring all their shares over here, and what I'll do is I'll pay them 30 cents on the dollar. Pretty generous, I'd say.
The rest of the scene plays out about the same as Mrs. Thompson asks for $17.50.
All I need's $17.50, Mary.
Mrs. Thompson.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
Mary and George both spend their honeymoon in the old abandoned house in both versions, with Bert and Ernie singing outside. Bert and Ernie, yes, that is their names, and probably the inspiration for Sesame Street, are the taxi driver and police officer who help make the abandoned house cozy for Mary and George on their first night as a married couple. But the only big difference is that they are friends with Mary in the remake. The next morning, we get a scene where they discuss their plans for the future that we really don't get in the original. Fast forward a bit and we see that the Bailey Park has become a reality in both versions. In the original, George and Mary welcome Mr. Martini to his home, and we really don't get to see much of Mr. Martini, nor will we see Sam Wainwright visit the Baileys. George has a construction company and builds Bailey Park while the building and loan finances it. While at the construction site, the doctor makes a house call to tell Mary she's having a baby.
Well, you and George, you aren't getting any younger, and most people have their families pretty well along by this time.
Oh, Doc, tell me.
Well, I can't tell you much. Like whether it's going to be a boy or a girl.
Oh, really?
Potter sends over his creepy limo driver, and the car impresses Mary, who then also realizes she doesn't want to be seen in Potter's car. In both versions, Potter invites George and Mary to admit defeat and offers them a job. He gives George a cigar in the original, but he can't offer her a cigar, so he gives her a box to give to George. He still uses the term garlic eater slur and offers them a job with the same salary.
In fact, you have beaten me, George. And as anyone in this county can tell you, that takes some doing. He's trapped. Yes, sir, trapped into frittering his life away playing nursemaid to a lot of garlic eaters.
Well, what's your point, Mr. Potter?
My point? The point is I want to hire you.
Hire me?
I want you to manage my affairs, run my properties. George, I'll start you out at $20,000 a year.
You've been stopping me, Marianne. Now you've done it. You beat me, that takes some doing. But she can't because she's trapped. Trapped into frittering her life away playing nursemaid to a lot of garlic eaters and taxi drivers. Isn't that pretty much a correct picture?
What's the point, Mr. Potter?
My point? My point is I would hire you.
You want to hire me?
I want you to manage my properties, and I'll start you out at $20,000 a year.
Both George and Mary are flattered at the offer and come around to their senses, telling Potter that they aren't interested.
In the whole vast configuration of things, I'd say you were nothing but a scurvy little spider. And that goes for you, too.
You're nothing. You really are. You're nothing more than a spider. And I'm really happy not to be caught in your scurvy little web.
While George storms off after telling Potter off, Mary hands him back the cigars and tells him, "I'm going to have a baby."
Here, Mr. Potter. Have a cigar. I'm gonna have a baby.
Why in the world did you ever marry a guy like me?
To keep from being an old maid.
You could have married Sam Wainwright and anybody else in town.
Well, I didn't want to marry anybody else in town. I want my baby to look like you.
You didn't even have a honeymoon. I promised you. You what?
My baby.
You're Mary, you on the nest?
George Bailey Lasso Stork.
This is a stork. What do you mean? What is it? A boy or a girl?
Mm-hmm.
In the original, George is labeled 4F because of his ear and he can't go to war. The other George in the remake is drafted and goes to war. He, along with Harry, Ernie, and Bert, all write to Mary, giving us some insight into their relationship. George returns from the war hurt, but thankfully alive. Meanwhile, Harry is awarded the Medal of Freedom for saving the boat of sailors in both versions leading up to Christmas Eve. You may have noticed that Bedford Falls looks a lot like Hazard County from the Dukes of Hazzard. Gilmore Girl fans will recognize Stars Hollow. That is because it was filmed on the Warner Brothers backlot set, while the original was a set built on the RKO Ranch that ran 3 city blocks with 75 stores and buildings. It's here that Mary connects with Violet Bick, the sultry and seductive girl who has a childhood crush on George, and who looks good in the dress.
Look, that's some dress you got on there.
What? This old thing? Well, I only wear it when I don't care how I look.
But is referred to Vi in the remake and is the best friend of Mary. She doesn't become a financial burden to Mary, compared to the original.
Good luck to you.
I'm glad I know you, George Bailey.
They both arrive at the building and loan, and unlike George, Mary doesn't get a chance to talk to Harry on the phone. They both are greeted by the bank examiner, but we don't get to hear how he wants to spend Christmas in Elmira with his family.
I want to spend Christmas in Elmira with my family.
I don't blame you at all.
Could we get started? I'd like to be home for Christmas Eve.
At the bank, we get the biggest difference, mostly changing the way Potter gets a hold of the $8,000. In the original, Uncle Billy accidentally hands Potter the newspaper with the money folded up inside. The remake has Potter take the newspaper of the money off the counter. This version takes some responsibility off of Uncle Willie, but both Billy and Willie are confused as to where the money went. Potter in both versions realizes what he has and doesn't give it up. George and Billy and Mary and Willie search for the money and discuss where the money could have gone. They both admit that they don't know how they lost the money, with Willie conceding that he is no good, and that is why Mary runs the building and loan. Mary confronts him like George, but doesn't grab him and push him down.
Listen to me. Frank.
I can't think anymore, George. I can't think anymore. It hurts.
Where's that money, you silly, stupid old fool? Where's that money? You realize what this means? It means bankruptcy and scandal and prison. That's what it means. One of us is going to jail. Well, it's not going to be me.
Stop that! Do you think you can get away with this just because you can act like a doddering old fool? Think! Just make one little demand on yourself. Where did you have the money, Willie? Where is that money, you fool? Don't you understand? We're ruined. George, Bailey Park, the building and loan, everything. Do you think Potter's just gonna let this go? Somebody's going to jail, and it isn't gonna be me. For once, damn it, I'm not gonna be the one.
In the following years, both couples have children, but in the remake, Janie, Tommy, and Susie are alive and well. Pete, unfortunately, doesn't make the retelling, and we don't get the name Zuzu for Susie. Both homes are chaos, with Janie playing the piano and Tommy asking how to spell word. Mary and George both forget the Christmas wreath, and Susie and Zuzu are both in bed catching a cold because they didn't wear their jacket to protect the flower they won at school. The petals fall off in both versions, and they pretend to glue them on for the children, sticking the petals in their pockets. Yes, Mary has pockets, ladies. They both yell at the school teacher, but unlike George, Mary doesn't threaten the child's teacher. After showing their frustration, both run out. They both grovel to Potter, asking for help and taking responsibility for the missing money. But he points out to both of them that their life insurance shows that they are worth more dead than alive. He's more sinister to Mary in the remake and calls for the police for a warrant for their arrest.
Gonna conquer the world. Here you come, crawling, on your hands and knees, begging for help. I don't know, I'll tell you why you didn't go for help to those riff-raff friends of yours, because they'd turn on you, run you out of town on a rail. First sign of trouble, they turn. Remember that, Mary, and they'll hate you more than me because they believed in you.
George heads straight to Martini's bar, drinks too much, gets into a fight with Zuzu's teacher's husband, gets his lips split open, and drives drunk, hitting a tree. The remake has Mary crash into the tree because she was praying, cutting her forehead in the crash. She then stops at Martini's bar, where she's offered only eggnog, but she doesn't get into any fights. They both almost get hit by a truck at the bridge and pray for an answer to their problem. Clarence falls into the river from the sky and George jumps in after him. This is something that I never really understood in the original. Clarence attempts to stop George from jumping, only to have him jump in and save him. Clara appears off to the side of the river and falls into the ice. Mary asks for the bridge toll-taker's help, and they both pull Clara from the river, who casually references Mary's experience saving Harry from the icy waters when she was a little girl.
Hold on. It seems like you've had experience. Oh.
In the toll office, the scene is very similar. Clarence and Clara tell them that they are angels second class and stopped George and Mary from committing suicide. They both tell the hopeful angels it would have been better if they were never born.
Sometimes I think it'd been better if I'd never been born at all.
Oh. What'd you say?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
In both versions, the snow stops falling and a strong wind blows open the door, changing time and reality. George and Mary are never born. Nobody can find the car, and they all duck into Nick's bar. Clara and Clarence order
Of a flaming rum punch. No, it's not cold enough for that. Not nearly cold enough. Wait a minute. I got it. Mulled wine, heavy on the cinnamon and light on the cloves. Oh, good, give me light and be lively.
I was thinking, let's see. Maybe I'll have a flaming rum punch. Oh, no, no. Let me think. Let's see. Mulled wine, heavy on the cinnamon, light on the cloves. Do be so good as to bring me mulled wine.
and George and Clarence are served whiskey, while Clara and Mary are served eggnog. Mr. Gower stumbles in and gets sprayed with water as they all get kicked out. It is here where Mary looks for the petals, and Clara gives the speech about never being born.
You've never been born.
What do you mean I've never been born? Of course I was born.
No, you're nobody. You've no identity. You've no papers, no husband, no children. They're not there either, Mary.
What aren't?
Susie's petals.
How do you know about those?
You've been given a great gift, Mary. A chance to see what the world would be like without you.
Then why am I seeing all these strange things?
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Well, if I wasn't born, who am I?
You're nobody. You have no identity.
Oh, what do you mean, no identity? My name's George Bailey.
There is no George Bailey. You have no papers, no cards, no driver's license, no 4F card, no insurance policy. They're not there either.
What?
Zuzu's petals. You've been given a great gift, George. A chance to see what the world would be like without you.
Pottersville was filled with bars and casinos in both versions. We don't get to see Uncle Billy in this alternative version. We learn at Ma Bailey that he is in the insane asylum. In the remake, he is homeless, sitting in front of the burn barrel outside the building alone. They both get into Ernie's cab, who doesn't recognize them and takes him home. They discover the home is abandoned and falling apart. Mary explores the house, going up to the second floor, and Bert shows up to arrest George and Mary, while Clarence and Clara intervene so George and Mary can escape. Ma Bailey doesn't recognize either of them, leading to the cemetery where they find Harry's grave. It is here that Clarence tells George that he doesn't exist, and we learn that George's wife Mary is an old maid, never marrying, and working at the library. George works at the gas station, or Cooter's Garage for you Dukes of Hazzard fans. Mary shows up, greeted by a sleazy George pretending to know her. Mary fights to get away, and then Bert shows up. They both make their way back to the bridge, begging Clarence and Clara to return their lives back to normal. The scenes play out the same way, with Bert showing up after looking for them and finding the petals in their pockets.
Bleed! Zuzu's petals! Zuzu! There they are! Bert! What do you know about that? Merry Christmas! Well, Merry Christmas!
Let me see. Susie's petals.
Susie's petals.
Susie's petals. Oh, Bert. Merry Christmas, Bert. Oh, it's snowing. It's snowing.
Hey, Mary, where are you going?
I'm going home. I'm going.
The iconic scene of them running through the town is very similar, with George and Mary both wishing Mr. Potter a Merry Christmas. They arrive at home to find the bank examiner, reporter, and the police with a warrant. The kids welcome them home and their significant other. We see that in both versions, the entire town pitched into a basket of money. Martini bursts into his jukebox to give his money, and Harry toasts both of them as they sing Auld Lang Syne, with a bell ringing that Clarence and Clara got their wings.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
Look, Mommy, teacher said every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Thanks, Clara.
It Happened One Christmas is not a terrible remake, just an unnecessary one. It was creative enough to figure out how to gender swap the main characters, and we did get a backstory for some minor characters, but it just wasn't enough to make this version its own. When the film was made, it covered events that happened 50 years prior, and some of these characters are dressed in 70s looking clothing with hairstyles, and I think the film should have updated the time period and not tried to make it a period film. The biggest obstacle was trying to compete with Jimmy Stewart. Marlo Thomas does a fine job as Mary, who in reality is different from Stewart's George. Her version of Mary settles into the idea that she's stuck in Bedford Falls, while George fights it to the very end. It Happened One Christmas is the only real remake of It's a Wonderful Life. Numerous Christmas movies and TV shows have borrowed the idea of what if my life was different.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
Why thank me?
Because if it wasn't for you, I would have never gotten my wings.
Chicken wings?
Merry Christmas, Carly.
Merry Christmas, Mitch.
So, was this movie necessary? The obvious answer is no. It's hard to be compared to Jimmy Stewart, who's considered one of the best actors of all time. While this was an interesting watch, it just reinforces the realization that remakes of good films are just unnecessary. Well, that's how everything compares with It Happened One Christmas and It's a Wonderful Life. Have a question on something I should explain? Then leave a comment below. Please click on the subscribe link to follow the channel. It helps out a lot. I'm the Christmas aficionado, and remember, stay off the naughty list.
Charlie Angel? Can I, have been born and stuff? This town really sucks. Hello? I mean, please?